Welcome back, listeners, to the BizBlend podcast. This is the space where sharp business minds meet deeper conversations. I'm your host, Sana, as always, and today we are diving into a truth that many leaders are waking up to. You can't scale a business sustainably if you haven't done the inner work yourself. Our guest today is Rob Matzkin. He's an executive advisor, investor, and serial entrepreneur with over 2 decades of experience leading high growth ventures across industries like AI, SaaS, and also deep tech. But behind the capital raises, listeners, and all the startup exits and stuff, Rob is a man who once struggled to read until the age of 10 due to dyslexia, and he now guides C suite leaders through the very much needed personal transformation required to lead strategically and sustainably. From founding his first business, hear me out, in an empty golf field to now overseeing a global $28 billion brokerage and hosting elite leadership retreats, Rob has lived the spectrum from burnout to balance, from brute hustle to intentional impact. So it's a blend, of course. So if you're a founder, executive, or an emerging leader wondering how to lead with more clarity, alignment, without losing yourself along the way, I am absolutely sure this conversation is for you. So, with that, Rob, welcome to the show, and I'm so much excited to have you here with us.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate you taking the time to speak to me today.
Of course, Rob. Okay, let's start with the origin, the beginning.
Mhm,
Dyslexia, reading at 10, and
mhm.
still building your first 20K dollar business. How did those early limitations shape the way you approached leadership and learning later on?
Yeah, I mean, you know, so being dyslexic, not really being able to read and not really it really affected more my mental health and my self-confidence. I was very shy growing up. And then also just how I consume the world, even today, is very different. I'm a much more audio learner. Like I don't read books, I listen to books. I've listened to about 2,500 books in the last 10 years, but I'm able to but my comprehension actually gets better the faster I listen because I think there's a little of attention issues there. So if I could and I could comprehend at 3.5x. So I'm really able to get through books very quickly. So I I look at it nowadays and my dyslexia as my superpower because I see the world differently. I function in the world differently. And actually the faster the world gets with AI, the easier my life becomes, right? And creating a lot of content and longer format emails or more format emails or anything like that with AI, it just made my life a lot easier. But going back, as a kid, I always, since I saw the world differently, I saw these business opportunities and I saw all these opportunities and I still see a lot of opportunities. So like you mentioned, my first entrepreneurial venture wasn't the lemonade stand, but I actually started a parking lot in my parents' front yard when the U.S. Open golf tournament came a mile down the road, and we were able to charge quite a bit of money, and we were able to actually make about, like you said, about $20,000 in a matter of 3 days. So it was quite exciting. It was quite fun. I learned a tremendous amount about leadership, particularly because I hired my friends, and that had its own challenges to navigate. Doing that as well, and working with your best friend and your girlfriend, and them having to do things the way it needed to be done. So it was always challenging in that sense.
I can imagine that. How was it? I mean, how did you communicate with them? Because uh, your best friend or girlfriend would say, "No, don't order me. Just tell me what to do, but don't order me what to do." I mean, how did he communicate? Because that can be really, really tough, especially for family-led businesses.
Well, I happen to grow up in a family business. That's a whole other story. But So with my friends, I communicated with them very poorly. I don't think that relationship ever really recovered, but it was already on the way out. So, but communicating with family and communicating with friends when money's involved and when business is involved, it's really tough, right? I work with a lot of family offices actually just on these subjects alone. I grew up in my family business and they always saw me as the 14-year-old kid. Even when I was in my mid 20s, I remember going to my dad, and I guess this had to be like 2010, maybe 2009. And I go, "Dad, we could use some more sales. Why don't we try this thing called, Google marketing and Google ads?" And he's like, "How much do you want to spend on that?" I'm like, "I don't know. We could start with like $20 a day." He's like, "You want to waste $20 a day?" And I'm like, so it's just always interesting trying to do things differently and everybody's set in their way. So family communication and leadership always has its own nuances, and it's less about the communication and more about the actions.
Wow, that's a good one. That's a good one, Rob.
Nice.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay. And now fast forward. I mean, now, if we talk about your recent journey and your work, you have worked with companies navigating complex scaling and then capital strategy also. And I think these two aspects they hold more relevance when we talk about startups. Um, and smaller or medium businesses,
Mhm.
what see missing in especially the executive teams who kind of skip the inner work, or maybe it could be one of the
Yeah.
reasons.
Yeah. So the biggest thing that I did in my 20s, and I missed out on a lot of opportunities, particularly around funding in my 20s, because I had a few syndromes. One was called Superman syndrome, where I knew I could do anything better than anybody else in the company. And I could, because I was more passionate, more dedicated. But on any given day, I had about 60 things to do, and I could probably do one or two things better than anybody else. So I didn't really delegate very well, and I was very cocky and overconfident. But where it pertains to fundraising is I also didn't want to be coachable. I didn't want to hear other people's advice or opinions, and I knew what was best. And I think that's the biggest mistake that I made then. It's a trap that I fall into now. But, sometimes all I do know what's best and through my experience. So it is also as navigate, but I still need to be coachable, or I still need to give the perception that I'm coachable, and I need to go through at least the exercise of being coachable, but I could still come back to the same conclusion after going through that exercise, right? And investors and advisors and employees, everybody wants to be heard. Everybody has an opinion just like me, that I think my opinion is the most valuable, or I think my conclusion is the right one. So if you're not coachable, you're not really investable, because if somebody's going to give you any size check, they want to at least know that they're going to be heard and probably listened to, right? And that all depends on the contract and what the relationship is. But I think that's the biggest thing that I see, especially with the younger founders, is you have to be coachable, you have to listen, you have to entertain people. Um, yeah, and being that cocky founder isn't going to get you anywhere, whether you're right or wrong. And that goes across the board with leadership. Your employees, everybody wants to be heard, everybody wants to be valued. And if you could give
Mm.
people that type of grace, it really goes a long way. And a lot of times, you know, we don't have the time, or we don't make the time to give people the grace that they need. Sometimes I just don't, I mean, in my day, I just don't have the grace to listen to somebody or debate somebody, or to hear them out. And it's just very much, let's take action. And some people are very gracious with me and accept that, and some people aren't. But I think that's the biggest principle then I really try and be as just as authentic as I can, as coachable as I can, and as the best listener I can be, which is always a challenge for me.
Oh, that's really humbling, Rob. Really humbling because um, this is what I strongly believe that to start with inner work, the first step itself is to accept that you need it, that you need it. And very, very beautifully that you mentioned that, um, investors, your team members, your colleagues, and everyone, they want to be heard. So being coachable and always having that spark of learning definitely is such a huge part of inner work. Um, and Rob, you burned out after years of building and also working on your definition of success. What all that has taught you about success, and also how do you translate those learnings into helping other high achievers resist tying their worth to performance?
Yeah, so just so I understand the question, it's when I burnt out, what have I learned from it, and how could I support others? Yeah. So I burnt out many different times from many different things, um, and many different reasons. I think the more comfortable I am and authentic I am with myself,
Mhm.
the less it happens, right? Um, and why I say and I start with that is the conversations that I have with myself are the most important conversations I'm ever gonna have. Said another way, the conversations you have with yourself are gonna be the most important conversations that you have, right? I've done a lot of inner work, I've done a lot of deep work, and the conversations, I just have a lot less of them. But that doesn't mean, and I just newly discovered this, that doesn't mean that those demons or opinions that I have in there don't exist anymore. So there's always different layers of my journey. But I think the things that burn me out the most is the stress, is the not knowing, is the uncertainty. So where could you provide certainty? Where could you provide stability? So most people get hung up in putting food on their table when they're struggling and starting out and maybe having some success, but not making enough money, especially in startup world. So how do you set yourself up that you have enough money to put a roof over your head and food on your table, right? Um, keep you sharp and hungry, but not
Mhm.
starving. I think that's one thing. And then so that always calms my anxiety when I know I have that paid. The other thing is that's really dangerous, that really will spike my cortisol levels on both ends of happiness and sadness, is we play this game of, "Oh my god, I'm worth $1 billion," and, "Oh my god, I'm gonna be sleeping on my buddy's couch the next day." And that could happen conversation to conversation. And that type of, like, cortisol release will go gets me every time. I even have some big deals that I'm working on, I'm like, "Holy cow." And then they never happen, right? So I try and just be on Prozac. I don't take medication, but I try and keep my emotions here versus here, right? The good, okay, I celebrate the wins, but I don't celebrate the wins. And the losses, like I acknowledge them and I learn from them, but I try and stay on track, right? So those are the things that will really get me over time. And then there's those straws that kind of break us, which is you know, not having boundaries. Other straws that will break me is um, not good time management or productivity,
Mhm.
more prioritization, right? I think what gets if I structure my day, I have a tremendous amount of freedom. And as long as I know I have structure and freedom in my day, and as long as I know I have food on my table and a roof over my head and the potential to have success,
Mhm.
I'm good. I could run a marathon like that. But when I have to sprint and I have to throw that thing over the fence every time and it has to be a bloody miracle,
Mhm.
That's when I burn out.
Mm, mm. Once again, it's quite humbling. Have there been any moments like this, Rob, where you found yourself, being surprised, learning about, and these usually come from the experiences that we have, or the conversations, the people that you get to meet while in your retreats, or in your coaching, or consulting, that something that you have learned or you knew maybe is not the right way of leading or working, or anything like that.
So just so I understand the question, in my travels and networking, have I ever run across somebody or some ideas that I agreed with or I disagreed with?
Disagreed.
Disagreed with. I
Disagreed.
haven't. Yeah, I mean, I just this weekend somebody was talking to me about something geopolitical, and I actually happen to be a geopolitical nerd and amateur expert, which is contradictory, I know, but I happen to know a thing or two. And they started sharing their opinions, and wow, not only did I feel that they're wrong, I felt that they're very misinformed, and that's a very radical opinion. Um, but what did I do? I listened, I smiled, I acknowledged them, and I moved
Mhm.
as quickly as I possibly could,
Okay.
but I wanted them to feel heard. Um, and I think that applies across the board. I don't need to prove to anybody, this goes back to my authenticity. I don't need to prove to anybody that I'm smarter, that I'm better, that I'm this, I'm more educated, or I know this topic more, or whatnot. I think that's where everybody gets lost in talking about politics. You don't need to agree with me. I don't need to agree with you. We're not going to solve the world's problems in that conversation. Now, I have been in conversations that, if you're in a board meeting, well, we do need to find an agreement. But the best way to do that is be authentic, share vulnerably what you think, why you think it's best, and honestly hash it out, right? And don't, belittle or demean anybody, but make them feel heard. And if you're able to do those things, it's you get to where you need to be a lot quicker.
Yeah, and you're right. And this is applicable across the board, and specifically in workplaces as well. In conflicts and arguments or discussions or meetings,
Yeah.
that we can give our opinions, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to, or I have to make you agree with that, or I do not like you because you told me something, or did not agree with me.
Exactly.
Great, great, Robin. This name looks very interesting. The Bond Summit. I had to mention that because it sounds like a powerful channel or a container for executive transformation. So how exactly it looks like, and I mean, what are the most surprising things leaders realize about themselves when they finally slow down? Some of your experiences we can share.
Oh, wow. I mean, there's so many testimonials that we have on the site. Let me just think of a few. But at the end of the day, at the Bond Summit, what we really try and do is just bring leaders together that have an ambition to be purpose driven in what they do, right? And purpose driven has many different meanings. It could be changing the world, it could be changing their employees' lives, it could just be having a purpose, right? So it doesn't really matter what you're selling or building, you could still have purpose. And when we really get to stop and think and pause and reflect, I think our members have had tremendous insights, and I've seen tremendous just changes and just growth. And I think those words are overused over the course of the few years that we've been doing it and our members have been coming, of who they are, their confidence level, their authenticity, how they see the world. And I think when you start pausing, having purpose, and doing some inner work, what you realize is, well, all this looking good and trying hard and doing all these different actions that we're doing, what
Mm.
what impact do they have? And how can we focus on the things that really have the impact? That when we look back in a few years and we throw away the to-do list and we really look back, those things that are really going to make the difference. And seeing that in the people that we work with is has just been something truly magical.
Hmm. That's very well said. Well said, Rob. Great.
Thank you.
So, if our listeners they would like to connect with you and explore more about your work and the resources that you're providing, what will be the best way?
Yeah. So my name's Rob Matzkin. My Gmail is Rob Matzkin at Gmail. My website's robmatzkin.com. And if you want to hear more about Bond Summit, it's bondsummit.com. But always happy to schedule time with people and see how I could help or support them and try and make a difference for them.
Wonderful. I'll make sure to have all the details and links in the show notes for our listeners to easily connect with you, Rob. And this was such a great one because not only we talked about strategies, but you also brought heart to the table. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. I appreciate your questions, your insight, and what you're doing here.
Thank you. Thank you, Rob. And to all the listeners, thank you for being a part of BizBlend. If today's episode has connected with you, or if it has struck a chord with you, do share it with a founder or a leader who is scaling fast and needs to hear that you don't have to lose yourself to lead successfully. And to connect with Rob and to know more about the Bond Summit, just refer to the show notes along with this episode. Until next time, keep blending clarity with action. Thank you.